the things I like to cover with you are arrays, functions, and for loops and while loops. So let's get started. All right, so let's go through the array just to make sure you're still familiar with it. So remember, unlike a variable, where variables you only have like one location, and you can only store one thing. Say you can store numbers, some kind of symbols, or you can store true or false, which is a boolean. So in terms of variables, you can only store one thing. For example, if I had a variable and I had like 3 and then I let it equal to 5, well, the result of this variable is what the last thing I set it to, which is 5. I might just set the text size to something a little bit bigger so you can see, right? So that's a variable. So if you want to store more numbers, like a list of numbers or a bunch of numbers, you need a variable. You need an array, which is, pretty much a data structure of a lot of variables. So for example, I could go var like names or animals equals square brackets. So these square brackets here basically tells the interpreter that, hey, I want an array. I don't want just a variable to store one animal in here. I want you to get ready to allocate space for me, because I want a lot of animals in this array. And you can give your array some values. So for example, remember, with an array you have locations. So every array in JavaScript starts at 0. So your first location is 0. So you go animals, you type animals, you put in square brackets, and you put the number of your location. So location 0. Let's store in the animal cat. And for the location 1, let's store the animal dog. Right? So what you do is you get cat, you store it into this array at this location. Dog gets stored into this location. Okay, so that's how you create an array, and that's how you put stuff into an array. Now, you don't have to create the array. This is an empty array. You don't have to create it empty. You could also put in cat and dog in a different way. You could push in cat, and then you could push in dog, and you don't have to tell it which location to store it into. You'll know that to store cat into 0 and then dog into 1. You'll know the index here is 0 and index here is 1. Just to prove it to you that it knows where it's supposed to go, I could text out animals square bracket 0 200 200, and you see cat, because cat's the first thing I pushed in, and the second thing I pushed in is dog. Now again, you don't have to do it like that. You could also create your array by putting it straight in when you create the array. Right? And if I print off animal 0, I still get cat, and if I print off 1, I still get dog. So there are many ways to store things into an array via JavaScript. You could access the location and then store in, push them in, and it will push it in order, or create the array with the items already in it. Cool. Now, in terms of this array here, just understand that if I replace something in location, let's say I put in location 0 cat, and then I put in location 0 0 dot mouse, right? It will replace that value. So if I print off 0, we should get mouse, because I chucked it cat in, then I chucked mouse in and replace it. So you can still replace values because each location is unique, but you can access it via a single keyword plus a position. All right. So here's something else that you can do with arrays. You could check how many locations is in the array. So what I can do is I could go txt animals dot length. If I go dot length, it actually tells me that there are 2 items. Turn that off. There are 2 items in this array. So you can see the last thing I did to the array is put cat and dog in there. Now I didn't push them in. I basically replaced it. I'm going to replace that to goat and mare, just to show you that it doesn't matter. And I'm going to add another one here. Wombat. And straight away it goes as 3 because there's 3 locations. However, even though there's 3 locations, this one is 0, this is 1, this is 2. So the last location is 2, not 3. 3 is the amount. 2 is the index or the position of the array. All right, so let's now use for loops with the array. So I'll just turn these texts off, and I'm going to go to repetition now. All right, so a for loop. There's 2 types of loops in our course: a for loop and a while loop. Now the for loop in JavaScript we write like this: for open curve brackets var, and we choose some kind of variable and this variable is going to be doing some counting. Most programmers just use the letter I. For me, for this course I tend to use index because I can stand for index, and it gives it a little bit more meaning. Index is the location of your array, for example. So you could use it. You can use index, especially if you're accessing arrays. But generally, we just use I. So I can stick with I because you need to get used to it. And then what I'll do is, so this is our starting value. Then I'll go less than or equal to our end value, which is what can we do? 2, and then we can go I plus plus, and that tells the I to add 1 every time you go through the loop. So that's our increment. So just to reiterate, you type for open bracket var I or any variable, index, whatever you want. We use I equals to some starting value colon I less than or equal to some end value colon, and then I plus equals to some kind of increment. Now I use plus equals if I want to change the increment to go up by 2. I can put 2 there to go up by 2, or 1 there. It's just a little bit better. Whereas this one, plus plus, you can only increment by 1. So we may not want that. Generally, if we use a for loop, we do want to increment by 1. So that's why we use plus plus most of the time. And this is a for loop. So if I create a text and I print off I to see what's inside I can go x equals y 100 y plus maybe 100 plus y times 50. So I just want to spread out my result a little bit, and we'll do that. Okay, save. What's the issue here? Sorry, 100. And what else do we want? And this is I. Sorry, 0, 1, 2. So just to let you know, if I put them all at 100, 100, Then 0, 1, 2 is all in one spot because they're both at one. All three of the numbers at 100, 100. So I give it a bit of a spread. So I go I times 50. And the reason why I use I is because I is changing. I starts from 0 and it gets added by 1 every time it goes through this loop, and it goes to, and it ends at 2. So you notice here it ends at 2. Right. Now what I'll do is I'm going to create an array. I'm going to call it temp bar temp equals to like that, and what I'll do is I'll do a calculation. What I'll do is I'll go temp I equals to temp times 2 or times 3. Alright, and what I'll end up doing is I'll print off whatever's inside temp. Not temp, I times 3. And what do you notice there? 0, 3, 6. So what's happening here? So this is our print off. You can ignore that for now. But understand that I'm printing the array at every location, because I changes from 0, 1, 2, right? And ends at 2. So what's happening in this code? Why is that 0, 3, 6? Well, remember, I is changing from 0, 1, 2. And what it's doing to I is multiply it by 3. So this whole thing will actually be 0, 3, 6. And 0 is getting stored where I equals 0. So what's happening is, this is what this line of code is doing this. Temp 0, which is I, equals to 0 times 3. Then temp I is 1 changes to 1, and then it's I, which is 1 times 3. And then I changes to 2, and it accesses the location 2 and goes 2 times I times 3. Because the formula is temp I equals I times 3. So this I here is changed from 0, 1, 2, and so therefore these two values is changed from 0, 1, 2. And that's why in the array it's got 0, 3, 6 as I print it off.